Hello, and welcome to Quantum Living Conversations. Today is a solo project. And so Quantum Living Conversations was an idea kind of started quite a few years back. And I just realized I was meeting some really neat folks and wanted to interact and get to share their stories. And, and I think we can learn from other people's experiences. And I was challenged by some, well, not challenged, but I was encouraged by some really great friends who pointed out that they would love to hear from me and my experiences. And so today is one of those solo podcast Quantum Living Conversations. Um, part of part of my experience has been growing up in Maine, right on the water, and the pleasure and the really fortunate of growing up, where I got to play outside all the time. And that was really a saving grace for me as a kid growing up, just to expend energy, climb, explore. I was just really encouraged to do a lot of outside activities. And so it's kind of ironic today that in the middle of 2020, the stay at home, it's a unique experience. Although in our state, up in Washington now, we're able to go outside, and at least for those of you who are feeling cooped up and a lot of energy is all kind of squished in, and you're about ready to explode, I hope you're able to at least go out on a balcony or walk around your town or find a park. It's amazing what Mother Nature can do for you. But today's conversation, I think, is going to go along the lines of a lot of folks have been asking me, how do I handle stressful situations? And a lot of times generally my initial response is quite different than the group around me, and it's usually pretty calm. It doesn't mean I'm not feeling excited or feeling excitable, but usually I'm like surveying, kind of evaluating the situation and seeing where I fit and what I've been doing, how I can offer, what role I can play in that situation. And at the beginning in March, as the shutdown was starting to happen, and just seeing all the different things around the world and all the stuff that the pandemic and all the things that we think about and go through, I kind of was wondering myself, like, what do I offer and what roles can I play? And really, a lot of time, as I kept asking that question, it's realizing that a lot of people are in very different places in their experiences, right? We're dealing with initially with just, hey, let's 2 weeks. We'll just do it and we'll survive. Some people that's been pretty hard on, and getting a paycheck and where am I going to take care of family and friends and myself is a huge question. Some of us are able to step back and have a very different experience. But what I've noticed is that we're all flowing in kind of the same similar pattern of roller coaster rides, of being okay up here and then dipping down, and it's really getting into really those areas that maybe we don't want to look at or don't want to feel and experience. And I was trying to, as I was asking the question, I was trying to figure out what experiences do I draw upon, or how do I draw on the energy to get through this unknown time. I think the name of this conversation is going to be navigating through the unknown. And lately, with the encouragement of friends, and just, this is a lot of my experiences go back to flying and how you manage situations that you've never encountered before. And a lot of that training actually does pertain to real life. And over and over and over again, when I asked what similar feel does this have, it really goes back to my first emergency situation that I dealt with as an aircraft commander. And so in experience. I was a brand new aircraft commander, probably 5 months just out of school. And despite what we like to tell ourselves, really means you're rather inexperienced. Even though you have a ton of training, yeah, everything falls on your shoulders now at that point. And on this particular day, it was a physiological incident, which means our physical well-being was in jeopardy, as well as flying the plane. And so I hopefully will explain a lot of this pretty easily. But so that day we were in formation. It was a pretty high priority mission, which is not normal for a training mission back in the States. So we were all offloading. It was 3 aircraft taking off in formation, and we were all offloading a very significant amount of gas, which means we're heavier, which kind of just changes a lot of your thinking and how everything's going to play out. And on this day, because it was such a high priority mission, we, there's usually a set time where the flight lead gets to call it quits if the weather's bad. And the weather was below minimums for takeoff, which means at Fairchild, there's just a lot of fog. And, but because this was an operational mission, we could wait 4 hours to take off. And what that does kind of psychologically is you've got to try to mentally stay in the game for who knows how long, up to 4 hours, which is kind of like how we are with the quarantine or stay-at-home orders and the various things. How do we stay focused in that short amount of time, and then to move on and do what we planned on doing? So right at the last minute, the weather lifted and we were able to take off. And immediately as we pushed up the power, it was winter, so we were using a lot of hot air to heat the aircraft. Probably about halfway through, I started to notice, pardon my language, but this is really just what it smelled like, a hot urine smell. And I never smelt it before, but we had already passed our go, no-go decision by the time I noticed it. And my co-pilot was flying, so I was just monitoring what was going on, making sure we take off. We were number 2, which meant now I'm also monitoring the lead in front of us. And so I just making sure we're all good, got the gear up and the flaps up. So making sure we're in a clean configuration. And that hot urine smell came back again, and I looked at the boom operator who sits behind us as a 3rd crew member, and she noticed the strange smell and started to, she was in a safe position to get up and walk after takeoff. And so right around 2,000 to 3,000 feet, I noticed my co-pilot and how he was flying. And there was a little bit of variation in his flying, but what I noticed was he was belligerent. He was picking on lead and just blaming them for his aircraft control. And that just kind of surprised me, because as he did that, I started noticing that my face felt flush and red and hot. And from our training, where we go through and we practice what it's like to lose pressurization at 25,000 feet, I knew that I was starting to get my hypoxia symptoms, which simply means I'm not getting enough oxygen to keep my brain in function. And so if I let it go, then my co-pilot was already acting a little bit strange. I was starting to feel strange in my body. So immediately I grabbed the oxygen, put it on, and my symptoms went away. And that's a good thing. But it's also an indication too that what I was sensing was real. Now keep in mind, we're at 2,000 to 3,000 feet. You're not supposed to, you can fly without oxygen at this time. So this is a really strange and weird thing. When I had put my mask on, I inadvertently, as I pushed my mic out of the way on my headset, bumped the microphone in the mask. And so as I went to tell the aircrew to put the masks on, I had broken, my microphone wasn't working. And so I ended up hitting my co-pilot because he was off in a little bit different way. Um, when he looked at me, I showed him that I was wearing my mask and that I have the aircraft, and he put his mask on. And again, his symptoms went right away. As you're dealing with emergencies in flying, we have a pretty easy system kind of running through our head on it's a basic outline: aviate, navigate, and communicate. And what it really boils down to is fly your plane first. Navigate is figure out where you're going. You don't want to go away from a good airfield to no man's land, someplace you can't land. And communicate is talking to any agency outside of you to um, get assistance and help tell what your plan is and so forth. And there's a reason for that order, and it's really drilled into you at pilot training. First of all, Aviate is taking care of yourself, making sure you're recovered and straight and level, or climbing in a safe manner, or you're doing the basic things to keep that airplane safe. And in this case, taking care of yourself first, because we all had to get on oxygen and get our brains back into flying mode and back into the system, so that we could use all our training. In this case, we got to use navigate, and I got to use the other aircraft, just make sure that we were in the proper position. But I let them use, take us where we were for a little while we figure out what our problem was. And then that time, communicate being last in that scenario, not knowing what's going on, I wasn't going to communicate and get all these people distracted me and giving me opinions and maybe being anti-helpers at the time when we had no idea what was going on. So I ended up taking control of the aircraft and flying and continuing to fly while the co-pilot ran the checklist. And mostly, as an aircraft commander, my job is to oversee and listen and make sure all the switches and stuff are good. And I normally would run the checklist in that case, because in past experiences, folks had skipped over important parts, and that was my preference usually at the time. But because I didn't have any communication, that seemed like the most logical thing to do at the time. The checklist we were going to run is a coordinated item, and so I had him run it and just gave him hand signals and thumbs ups. So basically what we were running is smoke and fume elimination. I mean, there really is no precedence for this. I'm flying a KC-135, which is, in the year 2000 was a over 40-year-old aircraft. So there's a lot of experiences, a lot of situations. There are very few new emergencies in that plane, but this one really, no one had ever heard of that, at least in our crew. And so the closest thing that we could run was, we're breathing in some kind of fumes that we just aren't aware of, and we don't know where they're coming from. So we ran the checklist, and again, part of taking care of your airplane is taking care of your crew. And in this situation, I had a boom operator who was who was pregnant and in that window where she could fly. And so somehow I caught her. I turned around because one of the ideas is once you go on oxygen, you don't take it off. And that's one of the safety things. If there was a reason for you to put on oxygen, there are very few reasons to take it off. Well, except for this case, I kind of had to do a workaround because my microphone wasn't working. I did end up weighing the odds and broke the seal, but to put my mic in so that I had a means to communicate. Otherwise, there's just a whole lot of workload for everybody. So again, monitoring my symptoms, making sure nothing came back, and yeah, that was a way to alleviate some of the workload. So as I turned around and looked at the boom operator to see how we could incorporate her, how she was doing, she, but bless her heart, she was looking out for us. She had her mask down on the table, would breathe a couple of things of oxygen, and then go around and try to find where in the plane in the vents that this was coming from. And so uh, not not being the wisest of choices, I commanded that she just keep on oxygen and not constantly go back and on and off, because we really weren't in a position where one of us could go back and help. So again, uh, it kind of cool to monitor and take care of everybody in the crew and bring that into the awareness of the emergency. Once we ran the checklist, and then as a crew decided what is our plan of action, where are we going to go, one of the things we had to do before we landed is dump gas, which means we were too heavy to land right now, but we're weighing the pros and cons of staying in an aircraft for 3 or 4 hours with who knows what's going on and where these fumes are coming from, or get rid of the gas as easily as possible, and then by just letting it out, and then going to land. And so in this case, again, the whole time we're replaying Aviate, Navigate, Communicate. In this situation, we started to expand our experience outside of our bubble once we ran the checklist to include the 2 senior pilots in the number 1 and number 3. Now I can bring in some more experience and weigh it with what I know and our capabilities. And always, as an aircraft commander, there can be outside influences, much like life, and it's always up to the aircraft commander to make the final call. You know, that everybody else can make suggestions, but you're the last one to like really see whether or not these suggestions are actually doable by yourself or your crew, or you need to go a different way. Nobody else can fly the plane but you. And so no one in the other aircraft had any more updates for us. And so then we got to expand our bubble even more and call back to the home base, because there's always a duty IP. And so the benefit of this is you have somebody who's just sitting on the ground, who has full access to all the manuals and all the information, more instructors, more pilots sitting around if they need to. And then the other thing is they can easily call Boeing, which is the maker of the airplane. And they can call maintenance as well. So they have a plethora of information available at their fingertips that we just wouldn't have at ours. And so as we're doing this, one of the things that, you know, is in the back of my mind is if we have to drop gas or offload gas, it's best to do it at 20,000 feet. That's where the gas vaporizes. It doesn't create as many problems for the environment. And so we ended up at this time, once we had our ducks in a row, we decided to break off while the instructors back home were making decisions and gathering information. We started to go back and go to a place where we could offload gas. Unbeknownst to me, at the time, the place that I decided to go was a holding fix that we know pretty commonly, right? So at this time, as you're flying, you're trying to like free up brain cells to take in information and continuously update all the while having a plan and going. And so the first thing that came to mind was this common holding fix that was near the airfield. And so as we were flying over there, again, the instructors had no other input. Nobody had ever heard of anything that we had described. They called Boeing, and there was no other engineering knowledge of what was happening. Maintenance didn't have anything for us. And so it seemed like everything that we're doing is pretty good. So again, aviate, navigate, communicate. The plane's going well. We're getting ready to move to the next phase of landing. And so part of that was putting us in a position to where we could land by offloading gas. One of the cool things that I've noticed in every single emergency that I've had in all my planes and all my flying is that usually that initial adrenaline and that like excitement of what the heck is going on and figuring out and finding a way to get out of your, you know, that survival instinct into a bigger, broader picture of what are all our choices, what do we have available to us. That Aviate, Navigate, Communicate helps bring you out of that, initial fear-based situation. And so once things are kind of at a level, I don't know, out of that condensed time warp place, usually you have time to like drone and get to where you're going. And so in those drone times, I've noticed every single time that as if I've kind of replayed what was going on, I noticed I would end up getting emotional, right? Like some tears would come. And honestly, I'm probably only sharing this because I heard another pilot say the same thing, that as he would experience all these things and just start to replay, okay, did I do everything right? And it starts to kind of calm down. He would notice like, kind of really feeling emotional and, wow, what just happened? And I wish I knew this stuff then. I wouldn't have made myself wrong. But it's kind of hard when you're in the middle of an emergency doing things and being the one that's being counted on to have some tears run through. And what I know now is like all that adrenaline, the tears help release, the chemicals. And to be honest, there's like a plethora of reasons why I'm sure we cry and have tears, but it is a form of release. Like in this situation, part of it, I'm sure was, wow, holy smokes. Like we physically were affected by this. And I don't know that I'd ever thought really through of a problem in an airplane where I'm physically faced with harm or, something in that way that I had zero control over, right? Like, you're always trying to fly the plane, but this time it was like something outside of me, like a chemical, and so the next thing I'm sure is like, wow, we handled that really well. Like, that's cool, right? Like a little bit of pride, and then holy smokes, I'm going to be counted on to land this, and like, how am I going to do? And a little bit of pressure there. So there's, even within those emergencies, while you're doing things, it's kind of like how life feels right now in this quarantine, of this up and down, like, whoa, I just nailed it. And then holy smokes, what the heck's coming? And, you know, this roller coaster ride. And really for me, evaluating, how am I doing? What can I be doing next? Where can I ask for help if I need it? And so after we offloaded gas, everybody agreed that this was the best plan that we could do, which helped, you got to give the folks on the ground credit because they're more senior pilots. And so when you have a really young crew like we had in our plane, that encouragement and support of the more experienced folks on the ground really does provide a cushion and support. And so I don't think I ever thank those guys, but yeah, we play those roles all the time for each other, whether we're in a flying squadron or we're just, friends and stuff in the world. And so that really helped move to the next phase of flight, which was coming in for landing. And, every single emergency I've had, with the exception of like if it's a landing emergency, like something physically wrong with the plane, those always end up to be the best, smoothest landings ever. And I think a whole lot of it is because you're focused on, I have to land right now. Let's get this, my priority is to get to the ground as quickly as possible and then get out of the airplane. And so, physically remove us from the harm and stuff that could be going on chemically wise. And so great landing. Just pat myself on the back there, but and I'm getting ready to laugh because here's this young captain who just did a great job, got out, landed, in my mind everything's perfect, and the wing commander happened to meet us, which I thought was a fantastic, nice way to get a pat on the back. But one of the questions that he asked right away was like where we dump fuel, and um, and so what I didn't know in my training at that time was that there was actually a certain place to dump gas that was on the opposite end of the airspace that I was in. And where I ended up dumping the gas was over his house. So a little bit of regret in that one, but it's one of those learning experiences that I have then applied to all of my students for the 15 years after that. And it couldn't have gone wrong, because when later in my years, when I ran into the FGREP, the former wing commander, he had all good things and was very kind. So, yeah, so, a little sheepish on that one. But the really cool thing about flying is you get really good at criticism, right? Because the only way that you're going to prove is like to really evaluate what you did right, what you did wrong. And because time is crunched, usually you're focused on what you did wrong. And so but one of the neat things was, because this was such a weird experience, it was interesting to be walking around as we're going up and debriefing everybody that we have to talk to, since fire trucks are rolled and it's a big emergency. Is almost every single instructor pilot was like, oh, you didn't pressurize, right? So what that meant was, if you don't pressurize, you start getting hypoxic at higher altitudes. And so because they weren't listening to the story, none of that is supposed to happen at 2,000, 3,000 feet above the ground. So it was neat getting second guessed by folks who didn't have all the information. And as I started to ask, what do I know in our world event right now, and how does this apply to the experience I just shared, there's just so many similarities with how you see the world work right now. And so many people second guessing things that may not have been there or don't know all of the information. And there was kind of a dismissive experience from the flight docs, because they were checking us out, making sure that we're okay. And I just started noticing that all three of us sitting there waiting, we had been cleared, they're doing up the paperwork, and I just noticed that all three of our faces were bright red. Compared to everybody else, I know it was cold, but it was just a massive bright red, and we all happened at the same time. And sitting in the doctor's office, I kind of went back to the doc and was like, hey, I really do think something happened. Like, look at our faces right now. Like, they weren't red before, and now here we are, like super flush. Like, can you just make sure that this jives with what with human physiology and so forth. So that helped me, being second guessed all the way from the airplane to the flight dock. It showed me that, hey, something really is going on, that I can trust myself, that even though I'm the youngest one in the room as an aircraft commander, that, hey, I'm good to go. And it wasn't until we went back and talked to folks, bad news travels quickly. And so folks were eager to learn from what we experienced. And it was really neat, because none of the experienced pilots had something, but one of the cross-trained pilots from C-130s heard the story, and he's like, hey, we had this all the time in our aircraft. When they over-service the ducts once they service the ducts, they would put too much of I'm not going to use the right word, it's been a few years, the glue, basically the glue that holds the ducting together, it would when they would use too much of it, all the hot air would melt it and then turn it into um, a contaminant that everybody would breathe. And so, folks were asking, well, did you continue on the mission? And the guy was like, of course not. You have a physiological incident. So that was like the icing on the cake of, hey, we've all made the right call. And it also helped because now maintenance had a place to kind of look at what was going on. And so, sure enough, the aircraft had just been serviced not long prior, and they had recognized like it was a new crew working on it, and possibly that was what happened. So everybody got to have an education on how to better maintain the aircraft. We all got to learn how to fly the plane better, and different things, um, where I got to teach about where to dump gas for everybody. Yeah, and so it just makes us better, um, having that debrief and really being able to look at things, um, for like how does that apply to the world and what's going on now? um, Man, there's so many people involved in where we are, but everybody's on a different path kind of that journey. And really the first thing that you can do with any experience is make sure you're okay first. We are all experiencing different stressors, and we're all in different situations, and you know you're the only one flying your plane, your body, your life experience. And you're the one who best knows what you need for that. And there's so many inputs that we can have, but you're the one that knows what you need. And so sometimes it does require tuning out other inputs, and recognizing, okay, that's enough. This is my plan. This is what I'm doing. Um, and recognizing those boundaries of, you can fly your plane differently, you can live your life differently, you can have your family differently, but this is what I need to safely maneuver around. And uh, the next thing is, once you're looking at who you are, it's like, where are you going? I know for me, one of the things I had to do is evaluate where my business is going. I've been, as I transitioned from the military, working on small business and working in that group of people doing small businesses, and really evaluating, not knowing how the future is really going to look. Where can I, not trim the fat, but where can I make myself the most useful? How can I offer my services differently? What do I have to offer? Is it really a value in what's needed right now, or is it something that's, am I basing my livelihood on things that maybe folks won't need right now, and being okay with that. And sometimes that's really hard. You know, Honestly, we're all going through a sense of loss right now. We understood how that past life worked, we thought we understood how everything worked for us, or we navigated and made it work for us. And now we're at a place where we really don't know. I don't know that anybody knows. We can have a lot of good guesses. I do know it'll be okay. I do know we'll come out, we'll land on our feet, and I think we'll be better for some of the decisions and things we have to experience, that we'll be experiencing. I think we'll come through that. The other side is the communication part, right? Um, if you're in a place that you have no clue, and this has never happened before, or kind of like when the airplane, letting people know what you're experiencing, asking for help, um, And also communicating your plan and letting people know where you're moving, whether that's just for yourself or where your family or amongst your community. Um, I think there are ways that we can kind of just keep ourselves in check, and you don't have to follow a checklist or you don't have to create a outline for yourself. But I do think there are new frameworks um, starting to be developed, and I think are opportunities that could be um, experienced after this. Um, Gosh, I don't even know what to call it. This worldwide experience, right? It's incredibly fascinating, and it's incredibly scary and emotional, and um, I think I kind of talked about it, but it is a loss of an old life. We knew what we had. Some of my friends who have put their heart and soul into businesses already know that those businesses have failed. Um, that one of my friends was doing a grand opening 2 months ago, and it's not going to happen, and they're not opening their business. So, um, there's a loss. There's a loss of people losing their jobs. There's a loss of security. Um, and I don't know that we talk about loss in this um, world very much, right? We have loss when it's physical loss of loved ones or dogs, but really I imagine we're in a grief. People could be going through the stages of grief, and that sometimes is what that roller coaster feeling is. And those stages of grief are a natural way to let go of the old and move on. And kind of like that lull moment where the tears are coming, and it's just too overwhelming, and like, holy smokes, what's going on? Your body and your mind physically need to kind of let that release happen. And I think a lot of people um, hit that kind of adrenaline, cool, we got this is great, and we're about a month in, and it's that lull of, okay, what next? Now now we're facing some emotions and feelings and worries that we um, aren't sure about. And don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to ask for help. um, I was reminded about a friend who, right as this was kicking off, like that week before we were all um, told to stay home, um, I was pretty diligent and mindful about things, but uh, she was working on the computer, and she was like, I'm just going to be overly cautious. Like, every time I touch a computer, I'm going to clean and wipe and sanitize and stuff, because I have my mom has an deficiency, or autoimmune disease, and I'm just concerned for her, and I don't want to bring this in. And it was really cool for me, because I had no awareness of that. I had no idea that people were worried about that's what some people are experiencing in life. And I was really thankful for the communication of her doing that. Like, it was not awkward. It was not weird. It was really nice of her to inform me and let me know that that's what's going on. It was another way to expand my bubble and my experience. And uh, a lot of times I think, if you're frustrated with folks or whatever, they may not know what you're going through. And one of the things that you can do to help yourself is ask. I've It's been super cool watching Facebook and the community, and folks um, when folks are asking they're stepping up to help, and um, realize we're coming at a point too that folks, I don't know that folks know that they can help. And so the more we're keeping each other aware, and asking and informing and offering, um, the more we get to work together as a community, and really figure out where we want to navigate to as we work through these kind of, challenging unknown times. I think for me, um, yeah, that's one of those um, ways that I find to kind of even out those points, um, while allowing myself to have those ups and downs. And y- you can't deny it because they're going to be there. Um, hmm. Solo podcasts are hard because you're the only one talking to yourself. But that's that's really how one of the ways that I draw upon my strength and my experiences to get me through unknown times. Um, we all have had times where we didn't know what we were doing, whether it's that time leaving home and it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up, or, um, faced with things as kids, or even later on as adults when you're faced with hard things. We all have it within us to pull that strength through. And um, the biggest way I do that is asking questions and kind of asking, well, what's available to me? How can I be of service? What do I have to offer? What do I know about these situations? And usually what happens is those answers will start to form. Um, it gives me a way to look and get higher and get a different point of view than in that um, contracted space where I don't see any answers and I'm only focused on um, the those things that are hurting. Hmm. Wish you all the best. One of the ways that, as I talked about being of service, is I was trying to find out how I could get across more of what I do, how a better understanding of emotions and feelings and emotional intelligence, the things that I learned transitioning, from wartime, having a lifetime of experiences, kind of start to overflow and interfere with my life, and how I was able to make shifts and changes from, really that contracted, uh, not fun place to having more choice and feeling more free. And a lot of that involves the intelligence of the body and emotions and feelings and reconnecting to all of that. And so um, there's I'll be increasing my presence with podcasts. uh, I already have 2 in the works or completed. Basically they're waiting for me to do my solo, and get the courage up to do that and get my thoughts together. But um, one of the things that I recognized in this time that we aren't talking about is not to be reactive but proactive. So how can we support ourselves with immunity? How can we physically support our bodies to deal with the stresses and the things that we're all experiencing? And so the next 3 podcasts are going to be dealing on different ways that we can support, bringing in some folks who I've met and worked with who are just really cool. I love how they explain things and really demystifying some of the things that are available out there to help you, um, and to help me, right? Flying my plane first. Really feel better in my body to support, uh, eh, whether it's nutrition or acupuncture or detoxing based on where I've been and what I've experienced in life. And so uh, that's really one of the pillars that I feel really strongly about, how we can build our natural immunity, bringing ourselves into balance. Um, and then I also have some folks talking about energy work and demystifying that, and how we can take it from this um, really weird kind of way and really bring it into this, it's real and we're experiencing all the time, whether or not we believe in it, and how we can use that in our body to feel better. So There will be a lot more podcasts and a lot more YouTube videos up on my YouTube channel, Quantum Living Creations. And yeah, if you have any questions, as you can see, I'm not used to talking about myself. I've already lived it, so I kind of think it's boring. And it's nice to have friends who push you to go a little bit beyond where you thought you were going. So thank you, friends. I hope you have folks who will push you beyond your limits and boundaries and stepping into new avenues where you can provide some fun and joy for people in your lives. If you're interested in any of the work that I do in healing and quickly healing and letting go, deirdrecatlin.com is my website, and you can email me if you have questions. I'm happy to talk to you. I think that wraps that up. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to talking to you next time. Good day.